From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy. Real people, real problems, real therapists. If you have any questions you'd like to ask or advice you'd like to give, come on over to podtherapy.net and join the conversation. It's a bonus episode with a special guest to discuss the Las Vegas World Record Orgy.
Orgy!
So get the kids away from the speakers and buckle in for some fun.
Oh, yeah.
And now, broadcasting from Level 9 Studios, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. It's time for some pod therapy.
It's time for some pod orgy therapy, Nick. Or jerapy? Is that what we call it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's introduce our special guest. We have with us Dr. Victoria Hartmann. She is a board-certified clinical sexologist in private practice and visiting professor for clinical sexology to the Institute of Advanced Study of Human Sexuality in San Francisco. She is also currently the executive director of the Las Vegas Erotic Heritage Museum. She's a workshop facilitator, researcher, publisher, author, speaker, consultant on women's sexuality, advocate for transgender rights, and our special friend. We love you so much, Dr. Hartmann. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you. And if you've lived in a cave for the last couple of weeks, maybe you don't know this, but Las Vegas went for the world record in orgy. Now an Olympic event. We went for the gold medal, and Dr. Hartmann ended up getting roped into this and became a national headline. She was probably only, superficially aware of the thing, and then all of a sudden, she and the Erotic Heritage Museum became front page news as part of this. So, yes. Dr. Hartmann, we are so excited for you to be here, and we have so many listeners that have been just absolutely ginned up for this. They are pumped. We are pumped, and we are so grateful for you. So thank you for coming.
Absolutely. What a great intro. Thank you.
Yeah.
We you
did all the work. We just read it.
We literally, we read your resume. You did that. It took me less time to read it than it did for you to do it. But we are super pumped to have you and so excited to hear about everything. We want to know about sexology. We want to know about the Erotic Heritage Museum. We want to hear, of course, about this exciting orgy and what that was all about. And Nick and I thought about doing a live podcast from the orgy, but we weren't sure if we were allowed to be there with raincoats and hazmat suits and just like...
You would have been drowned out.
Yeah, probably.
Literally and figuratively as well.
Sitting there with our little radios, like, and now it's happened. Like I imagined it like a National Geographic thing. Yeah. Like David Attenborough, like sitting there like, yes, is approaching the female.
It would have been fun to narrate.
That would have been really fun.
Yeah.
Like a human mating ritual on the Serengeti. Watch as he approaches. Gathers the scent.
Next on National Geographic.
They wait for Barry Manilow to begin. And as the chorus comes on.
That would have been more fun to be a DJ.
Right?
Oh, yeah. But, I would never want to DJ an orgy because the requests have got to be ridiculous.
Well, what would the pace be of the music?
Yeah, where are we going with this?
What's the beat going to be?
Yeah. No, but you do need to have a beat. You need to have a beat.
Right?
There needs to be something in the background.
3,
It can't just be
2/4,
right.
This mountain of humanity with no sound. Like I need something. I hope there's an air conditioner on or like a loud fan.
Scorching, right?
Yeah, that's just all. I feel like I'm at a plumbing convention.
Right.
This is very odd.
Really?
Oh, Victoria, I'm so excited to have you already. You have met my standard.
I like your guys' attitude already.
So I guess first off, we should have a discussion about like what is a sexologist?
Yes.
Can you describe that for our listeners?
Yes. Well, it's a really good question, and it has a lot of myth attached to it and misconception. So a sexologist is someone who does not operate from a sickness or sin perspective. Okay.
Right.
When someone comes in, let's say my area of expertise is paraphilias.
Yes. You have to tell the listener what that is.
Okay, so paraphilia is what is considered, in quotes, an unusual sexual variant.
Right. Okay. So we might be talking about voyeurism.
Voyeurism or a foot fetish. Or,
fetishes.
Right, fetishes.
Yeah,
okay. When folks come to me because of what I studied and what I was in practice for, let's say someone came in and said, well, I'm interested, I watch pornography that includes transsexual or transgendered people, and that's where I get my excitement from. And my wife or spouse is having a real problem with that. So my job is to first examine where that origin might be. If there's not disordered behavior, but if there's maladaptive behavior that's attached to it,
Right.
and how to effectively manage it so that that person doesn't feel repressed.
Yes.
So, because a lot of times repression is what leads to acting out behavior.
I see.
Right. So my job is to find a way to help them manage or to work with them together
Yeah.
to find management skills so that they can get their needs met and to be able to still function in either their relationship or in society as a whole.
And one of the key things I heard you say in the beginning there is we do not take a shame perspective. We do not take a pathology perspective.
No.
And it's interesting, guys, what you don't understand if you're not sort of an initiated therapist here is that when she's quoting paraphilia, she's quoting a chapter from the DSM-5,
Right.
that psychology Bible thing. And because it's in there, that means it's considered de facto a pathology, a
Right.
bad thing
Right.
that should be addressed.
It's disorder.
But I notice you immediately reframe that and grab it and say, hold on. Let's not take these and immediately shame them because that's an ignorant approach, right? Let's be sex positive.
Right.
And then let's understand how does this behavior find its natural way to exist legitimately and authentically? And how do we navigate the obstacles of life? Because it's true, we're in relationship, there's other people that matter in our life, and your job's to come in and sort of reconcile your legitimate human desire that you should not be ashamed of with this larger culture or your other commitments.
Correct. Yeah,
Very
that's a
interesting.
really good summary. And when I was doing my dissertation, I was immediately drawn to what's considered the darkest part, paraphilia, which is
yeah.
necrophilia.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And I thought I was a big badass and had coined
Yeah.
this term progressive paraphilia. I'm going to find a way to figure out that this is progressive. So, if there's acting out behavior, I can be the one to stop it.
Okay.
A young scientist
Yeah, right.
and
We're always trying to coin terms in that PhD
yeah,
thesis.
right. And the great thing about science is you're usually wrong. And what I found was not only are at least those that I studied are not likely to act out criminally, but also if they had a partner or someone that they could communicate their desires with,
Right.
any maladaptive behavior that might have been attached to the repression of the paraphilia was diminished or went away completely.
And I'm going to translate that because
Okay.
this is good because
Yeah, I'm using a lot of lingo.
high class clinical. She's dusting off that PhD. But what I kind of hear you saying in that is, so here are folks that are doing necrophilia or they're interested in it. Necrophilia is sex with a dead person or somebody that's simulated to be dead.
Right.
And
well,
so-
I studied those that were with partners that were simulating.
And
right.
that's the key because I hear you saying when we say the phrase acting out in sex education and sex therapy, we tend to mean doing something you prefer that you didn't that gets you kind of a stub toe.
Right.
And so in this case, these folks could do something that might be considered illegal in Arkansas or wherever they're from. Right. And so how do we navigate them so they can express their need, live out their fantasy in a healthy way, but in a way that's consistent with our real life?
Yeah, no, social mores.
And that might be a partner who's willing and understands. Right. But boy, I can imagine the navigating of that expression, having to help the partner understand, and you coming in and normalizing it and saying, hey, let's not use sin language, shame language. Let's not start with a position of sex negative. Let's start with a position of all ideas welcome, and this is just who I am.
Right.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's in a nutshell. Not such a nutshell. What sexologists do.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, and then you currently are at the Exotic Heritage Museum.
Erotic.
Sorry.
Which
The Exotic Heritage Museum, very different. Lots of zebras, giraffes.
more
That's,
the
sex also
zoological
very
side.
good. Yeah, the sex still it's just wonderful. The exhibit's great.
We do have an evolution exhibit, so that counts.
That's true.
Yeah, but it's Erotic Heritage Museum.
I've been there and I liked it. It was really interesting. It
is fascinating.
Thank you.
I try
it's
to,
a really cool
I've
place.
bumped in there a couple different times for lectures and things. It's never the same place twice.
Right.
And it's so fascinating. So a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I've heard about that in Las Vegas. You pop in and it's like a porn palace. And it's like, no, it celebrates all erotic art and the history of humanity.
Right.
And a lot of people just discount that. And they think, oh, humanity made numbers and language and, cuneiform tablets and like that's our history. And no, man, like sexuality, expression of sexuality goes all the way back to the caves.
Right.
Sure.
And that's part of what the Erotic Heritage Museum tries to capture. It's not just modern sexuality, ancient sexuality, all historical sexuality.
Right, and we've taken that back as far as at least modern science allows us to, where we spent a year curating an evolution exhibit called The Evolution of Human Sexuality. It's not finished. We did open it.
It's
but
still evolving.
it's still evolving.
Yeah. Always
and,
unfinished.
and a lot of people don't associate evolution with sexuality, even though they're
that is what
so
it is.
tied together.
There is no evolution.
Right.
If we're not pairing and pairing.
Right. Yeah, but we also have artifacts and art. Some of our artifacts date back to 1500 BCE.
Yes.
From ancient Samaria to Asia.
Wow.
And my favorite, actually, in the museum is I went to Hawaii to investigate a purchase for the museum. And it was this huge worldwide collection. And what sold me on it and how I managed to convince our grand patron to make the investment was there's a set of 3 leaves from India that have erotic art painted on them that are 400 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And completely intact.
Wow.
And I said, we have to do this. We have to get this collection. It was a big purchase, but I managed to convince our grand patron.
And that's there. That's at the museum now.
That's at the museum. It took us 2 years to curate.
Oh my gosh.
And prepare, and we opened it at the beginning of this year.
Whenever your sex exhibits are older than the country,
right?
That's a big deal, and that's so fascinating. I think that she's wearing a shirt right now, which you'll see in our pictures for the show. It's a sex geek, right? Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about her and Dr. Morgan and some of the other folks I've met over at the EHM. They're all sex nerds, and they're academically interested into it. They're culturally interested into it. It's their psychology prowess. What got you interested in sexology and clinical sexology and the whole field of it?
It starts actually when I was 5, and some folks are unsettled by a conversation about children and sexuality, but my story is actually really innocent.
Okay.
I was born in Maine, but spent most of my youth in Germany, where my mother was from. She was an immigrant to the United States. And I was 5, and I remember very clearly coming home from kindergarten on the bus. And was sitting on the chair over the wheel well, and got some funny feelings that I didn't know.
Right.
I had no clue what they were.
The wheels on the bus go
round and round, right? And so I went home to my mom, who was still a stay-at-home mom at that point, and she was ironing in her bedroom. And I went in and did the little girl dance that we do when we have to use the girls' room, and said, Mom, something, I don't know what's going on. I feel weird. And I kind of told her the story, and she sort of half turned around, and she was like, "Oh, sweetie, that's just you growing up," and went right back to ironing. And that was the parenting moment that I fell back on when my children started asking questions.
Right.
Because she didn't shame me. She didn't tell me anything was wrong. She just planted that seed that you are okay.
Yes.
And that's where that springs from. My mom lives like two blocks from my house.
Aww.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite people. And
the Little Germany part of Las Vegas?
And the Little Germany part of Las
Vegas. Little Deutschland? Yeah. A lot of people don't know it's there.
I know, right?
It's basically the Hofbrauhaus.
Yeah.
That's it. It's one block.
Exactly.
It's Hofbrauhaus and the CVS across the street. That is it.
Yeah. And the local bakery. She's always big on the local bakeries. Yeah. But it didn't just solidify my attitude towards myself, but also towards sexuality as a whole. And I just was always really from childhood, I was interested in it. And luckily, when I was still young, my mother, we were living half-time in Germany anyway. So my father was in the military, and so when they divorced, we just moved back to Germany, and that's where I spent my youth until I was a teenager, late teens. And the education system, especially around sexuality, is so progressive.
Yeah.
There's no stigma or shame attached to sexuality, at least the way I was taught growing up in Germany.
So the whole culture of the place, when it comes to sexuality, it's not this, we don't talk about that in polite society.
No, actually, we have a book at the museum that is given to, or at least at the time was given to those that were in grade school. And there are drawn depictions of sexuality and sexual interaction framed in a way that, it's framed so that children understand it.
Right.
And in the teen magazines, they have depictions of teen sexuality.
Interesting.
Not intercourse, at least in the 80s when I was growing up there.
Yeah.
And it was all about love and relationships and the expression of it. And it was just, I never grew up with stigma.
Wow.
Right.
You're the one. 'Cause, I mean,
Well, yeah, and just listening to this is one of the things that has always kind of bothered me about our society, American
Right.
society, is this